You're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm Ali Abu Nama here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. A large-scale Israeli military assault focused on the northern occupied West Bank forcibly displaced 40,000 Palestinians from their homes, the largest displacement of Palestinians in the West Bank since 1967. That was the year Israel occupied the West Bank, along with the Gaza Strip and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and Syria's Golan Heights, and displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes in the process. Dozens of Palestinians have been killed so far during the Israeli assault, which is in its second month, making it the longest operation in the West Bank since the early 2000s. The Israeli military operation was launched days after the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was implemented in Gaza. It was framed to Israel's right-wing base as a continuation of the war to pacify their opposition to the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, is now indicating that the displacement is permanent and has instructed the army not to allow Palestinian residents to return to their homes. Palestinians fear that their displacement from the camps is Israel's underlying goal and now appears to be closer to reality, even as the Israeli army consistently claims that there hasn't been any official decision to make forcible displacement its policy. Jenin refugee camp, Tulkarem refugee camp, and Nur Shems refugee camp have become almost completely deserted. The Israeli operation includes deployment of snipers in residential neighborhoods, raids on homes, arresting youth, aerial bombardments, and the destruction of buildings and critical infrastructure. B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights group, says that Israel has begun replicating tactics and combat doctrines honed in its current offensive in Gaza. That includes airstrikes on civilian neighborhoods and widespread and deliberate destruction of homes and neighborhoods, as well as the forced expulsions. B'Tselem said this suggests that Israel is working towards what it calls the Gazification of the West Bank, now focused in the northern West Bank, but of course it could well expand to other parts of the territory. Joining us now to talk about the situation on the ground is Zena Tahhan, a freelance journalist based in Jerusalem. She has over 10 years experience covering Palestine as a print and video reporter. Welcome, Zena. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Zena.
So, Zena, in an article you wrote for the Electronic Intifada titled Israeli Soldiers Vandalize and Desecrate Homes, West Bank Homes, you speak to Fida Abu Zena, who was forced out of his home in Al-Farra refugee camp in the foothills of the Jordan Valley with his wife and 3 children at gunpoint. You write, quote, using his home as a military outpost, soldiers lived, slept, and ate in Abu Zena's house for 11 days, during which they vandalized it beyond recognition, leaving a stench of urine and feces and used condoms on the floors and in the closets. Abu Zena's teenage son was executed by Israeli soldiers last year as he pleaded for his life. Talk more about what you witnessed in Al-Farra refugee camp and what people are going through there.
Okay, thank you, Ali. So what happened in Al-Far'a was that Israeli forces, it was actually the least affected camp in comparison to what's happening in Jenin and Tulkarem. Far'a, they went in for 11 days and they pulled out of the camp itself, which is in the governorate of Tubas. And there were villages in Tubas that were targeted for longer periods of time. But the Far'a refugee camp itself, I can say that it witnessed the least amount of damage in comparison to what's happening in Jenin and Tulkarem now. However, what I've been seeing, in comparison to the raids and the invasions that I reported on in the past few years, what I'm seeing now is that Israeli soldiers are taking it upon themselves to take their revenge. each soldier is doing whatever they want to do just to like get their revenge for October 7th. And they say it, and they, when they come across journalists, the first question they ask you is, what do you think of October 7th? So there's this feeling of these soldiers, leaving your feces on the ground is, I have no words. I have no words. When I was writing the article the next day, I was just like breaking down into tears because it's so horrific. It's so horrific, on top of everything that Palestinians go through, Israeli soldiers are literally sorry for the word, shitting in people's homes.
And they did that during the second Intifada 2 decades ago. I remember there was a lot of reporting. They went into the offices of the Palestinian Authority and defecated in the desks and in the drawers. So these are long-standing tactics.
It's really horrific. What's happening in Jenin and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is unprecedented. As you mentioned, it's the largest displacement since 1967. What's worrying now is that what's going to happen next? Now, Israel has said it's going to remain in these areas until the end of the year. But what's going to happen to these people? You're talking about tens of thousands of people out of their homes. Some of them are living in mosques. Some of them are living in shelters, schools. Some of them are in wedding halls with zero privacy, of course, and they can't sustain their lives this way. And nothing else is moving. There's no international pressure. It's, as Nora, you said, everything is being normalized, as if this huge operation where you're paralyzing cities, where you're kicking people out of their homes, the vast majority of them were forced to leave. These are not people who, it's not the first time they leave their homes. These people wanted to stay even if the Israeli army was raiding. They wanted to stay in their homes, but they were forced out in the end at gunpoint. The vast majority of people were forced to leave their homes. And the Israeli army itself admitted, they said, we emptied the camps. It's an admittance of the fact that they made this happen. They forced people out of their homes. The vast majority of people being killed are civilians. There is no armed confrontations on the ground. These camps are empty. Israel has full control over these camps. So there was even no need for Israel to come in with tanks. It was a complete show of force. It was a military parade in Jenin with the Merkava tanks. They're not using them for any kind of combat. And as I said, Israel has full control over these camps. They're stationed in and out on all the entrances. They have checkpoints all over around the cities themselves. So I think that Israel is trying to get people used to its presence in these cities and to have them just go about their daily lives, because in the end, these are human beings. They're gonna have to go on with their daily lives. And the fact that Israel is remaining in these areas is a huge problem. It's a huge, you're paralyzing these massive areas, these cities that are economic capitals, in this way, with the Israeli army remaining in these large numbers in tanks and snipers all over the cities, not just in the refugee camps, but around. And as you know, these refugee camps are extremely central in these cities. So it's a humanitarian crisis in the making right now. It's horrific.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ali.
No, go ahead, Nora.
Well, I wanted to also talk about the settler violence against Palestinians that's also been on the rise since October 2023, accompanied with Israeli settlers establishing facts on the ground, constructing so-called outposts, linking with established settlement colonies, and of course being protected by the Israeli army. While all Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are illegal under international law, for whatever international law is worth these days, and building them is a war crime, what Israel refers to as outposts are often built without even Israel's permission and are considered illegal under Israeli law. How are settlers terrorizing Palestinians in areas of the occupied West Bank outside of the military operations? I mean, day after day, I've been seeing videos of people from Masafaryata in the south to villages in the very north, being attacked violently by these settler thugs. What can you say about the settlement enterprise and the settlers themselves?
Before I specifically speak about the settlers, I think the situation in the occupied West Bank, since, I mean, obviously way before, but after October 7th, things are unraveling at a really quick pace, whether that's in terms of the Israeli military operations, whether it's in terms of settler attacks, ethnic cleansing, forced home demolitions. Everything is happening in parallel at very quick rates. And the fact that nothing is moving, the entire world is going on. There's no, as you said, international law has no impact in Palestine. So there isn't, people are isolated. They have no one to protect them, especially the villages vis-a-vis the settler attacks. The villages are on the front lines of settler attacks because every village is surrounded by settlements, and as opposed to the cities where you have, it's more protected, kind of, just because of the amount of people, and like the settlers don't really come into the cities themselves because they're afraid. They go to the smaller villages where people are defenseless. They burn homes, they beat up people every day. There's settler physical attacks on residents. And things that have become, people don't talk about anymore because they're happening so frequently. Like Hebron, every single Saturday, there's a huge settler rally where they close down the entire old city, and the settlers are just rampaging and terrorizing residents. You have new outposts being built all over the occupied West Bank. You're just driving by and you suddenly see a new set of homes being built on a hill, and there's electricity being, they're giving them all the services that they need. And this comes in addition to the near lockdown that people are in the occupied West Bank since October 2023. So every single city and village has checkpoints or settlements surrounding it, right? I'll take Ramallah as an example. Ramallah had 3 entrances and exits. All of these have checkpoints on them, of course. After October, we have one of them closed down, so now there's only 2. One of them is completely, it's Qalandia, basically, Qalandia, and the other one is they're closing down the cities. People are not moving unless they need to. There's no movement between cities unless it's completely necessary. Even movement between villages and the cities is very limited. So you can imagine the economic, the social, on every level, this is like you're ripping the geography apart, you're ripping people apart. And the West Bank is so small, ripping cities from each other, you're affecting major sectors, as in like fruits and vegetables coming from the north are taking ages to make it down south to the other cities because of the closures. The closures are a war in and of itself on the people. Really, it's a daily thing. We've been talking about checkpoints for decades, but it's not normal. It's never going to be okay, and especially under this situation where it's so much more closed off, it's really suffocating, extremely suffocating.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, Zena, what just before this major Israeli assault, there was another massive operation by the Palestinian Authority in and around Jenin refugee camp. And it came, many commentators said that it was an effort by the Palestinian Authority to prove to the incoming Trump administration that, look, we can do the job that Israel needs us to do, and that, that the United States needs us to do. What has been the role of the PA in the current situation, and particularly with this ongoing assault? And what sort of assistance are all those tens of thousands of displaced people going? You said they're in wedding halls, they're in mosques, presumably many of them have gone to relatives' homes. Is there any organized effort? I know that the point is not to sustain people. Well, it's not just a humanitarian issue, but at the same time, tens of thousands of people have urgent needs. Talk about the PA and also what kind of assistance people are getting?
On the assistance, this is how bad it is that there is no centralized any kind of assistance, and people don't just need food, they need shelter, they need basic necessities for their children, they need they need milk and pampers for children, so many different, you can imagine you're leaving your house with nothing on you. The vast majority of people were given 5 to 10 minutes to leave their homes. Now it's completely community-based. The Palestinian Authority stepped in with very limited capabilities, giving people aid, stepped in kind of late as well. Until now, people are just living off of already financially drained communities. So you can imagine, communities that are going through something very difficult are trying to help others with the very little means that they have. The Palestinian Authority, right before the whole thing in Jenin, before the Israeli army raided Jenin on January 21st, 2 days into the ceasefire in Gaza, the Palestinian Authority had besieged the Jenin refugee camp for over a month, for 50 days. The Palestinian Authority laid siege. It was killing civilians. They were arresting people, and until this moment, the Palestinian Authority is still in Jenin operating and arresting people. And the residents themselves talked about this as a joint operation between the PA and Israel, which was a new development, a huge development of the PA and Israel operating at the same time in Jenin camp, while Israeli army is hitting with airstrikes, and the PA being there and also carrying out attacks on civilians. And they killed Palestinian journalists, Shada Sabbagh. So the Palestinian Authority was trying to make it as though these are criminals, that these are outlaws, that these are all kinds of words that Palestinians themselves do not believe, or Palestinians themselves do not view these men in this way. And I don't think that people bought it. I think that people know that the Palestinian Authority is against the people, and we know that from years on. It's not just from now, especially since the killing of Nizar Banat in 2021. The relationship on the ground with the PA has shifted, and the displacement that took place, there were thousands before the Israeli army entered the Jenin refugee camp. Thousands of people were pushed out of Jenin because of the PA's assault and what they were doing. And we've seen some horrific videos, Ali, of how the PA is treating these men as though they are traitors, as though XYZ. When I don't also want to give... They have very basic capabilities, these men. They are not an army. They're not... this is coming out of a vacuum, right? Of being attacked and not being able to defend yourself. So while many people have reservations about whether this is the right way to go right now, or let me take a step back. Many people said that these men needed leadership. They needed to be guided, and which is what the PA didn't do. Instead, the PA turned against them. So there is a lot of awareness. It's against the PA and what it's trying to do. People know and understand, especially when you have Hamas in Gaza doing what it's doing and being able to be powerful until this moment.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, Zena, just to inform our viewers, you mentioned Nizar Banat. Of course, he was a prominent political activist in the West Bank, very, very critical of the Palestinian Authority and of Mahmoud Abbas. And he was also running for elections before they were ultimately cancelled by the Palestinian Authority. But in June of 2021, Palestinian Authority security agents came to his house and to detain him and beat him so severely that he was killed. And although there is supposedly a trial, it's been going on for years and years of the security officers with no progress and no accountability so far. So just so people know what that reference is. Yeah.
Can I add one last thing on the PA,
Yeah.
which is also a big development in the past few weeks? Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas decided to try and appease the Europeans and Americans by diverting the issue of payments to the families of people who were killed by Israel or the families of prisoners. And this was also received extremely badly by the people, because it's a very holy issue, the issue of payments to the families of prisoners, the men who are not able to be there for their families because they're behind bars. The Palestinian Authority issued a decree saying that they're going to be taking this issue to a private company that is going to be paying these families, and that these families are going to be paid according to social status and not amount of years inside Israeli prisons. This is also the PA digging its own grave. We had the head of the Palestinian Authority, the head of the Palestinian Prisoners Society, Qaddoura Fares, come out and talk about, basically blast the PA for doing this. The next day he was removed. It's becoming more and more of a dictatorship, and I don't think it was ever established to be a state. It was ever established to give Palestinians rights.
Indeed. Zena, finally, can you talk about the impact that Israel's, supposed ban on UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, has had in the West Bank? I mean, just a few weeks ago, Israeli police stormed a bunch of schools in Silwan. I can't remember exactly, Beit Fajar, maybe. I can't remember. Places around Jerusalem specifically, and detained the principal at one school. They shut it down. They shut schools down. What has been the impact that you've seen around the West Bank with Israel's war on UNRWA?
So in the areas that Israel is operating, so Jenin and Tul Karam, the UN agency is suspended in these areas because it's not able to operate in areas when there's a military invasion. So already you're talking about 2 months of no services to these people, and the UNRWA is only able to provide basic food aid, very small things to the people that are outside of the camps, and they give them coupons. So they don't really have a choice of what to use this coupon for. They have to buy certain things. The attack on UNRWA is going to have a huge impact humanitarian wise, because you have over 20 refugee camps across Palestine that are dependent on UNRWA for schools, for basic services like garbage collection, like the most basic things. And UNRWA itself was created for these refugees. So removing this and creating this humanitarian vacuum is going to be a disaster. If there is no alternative, the Palestinian Authority in no way can play that role, because even the security in these camps is run by UNRWA. There is no PA in these camps. So it's not just a humanitarian thing, it's a huge political thing as well, the vacuum that's going to be created. And it's not just UNRWA, the US is cutting also US aid, and there are so many organizations on the ground that are dependent. Actually, the vast majority of organizations on the ground in the West Bank are dependent on international donors and money coming from the EU and the US. So the fact that the actors that that give this aid are the ones cutting it off is just a horrific cycle of, we don't know where this is gonna go.
Yeah.
Honestly, the scariest thing in Palestine is not knowing what's coming next.
Well, Zena, we're extremely grateful for your reporting at the Electronic Intifada and for you joining us today. We feel that the situation in the West Bank is definitely being overlooked globally, and even for us, it's been a challenge. So we're very grateful to you for providing this in-depth information and knowledge. Please stay safe as you can when you're out reporting, and we hope that we'll be able to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, guys. I'm really glad that I was able to come on and talk about it. So important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Zena. It was
Thank you.
fantastic.